Today's episode has been filmed and recorded, so if you are listening to this episode, kindly refer to the description for the YouTube link. And if you are watching today's episode on YouTube, kindly refer to the description for the podcast link for Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Every little bit helps. Thank you. So this week we indulge in aviation. We had a pilot who is a well and truly dear friend of Brendan's, who came on to the episode this week for an interview, and we explore his previous flight missions to Antarctica, Baghdad, missions for the UN over Africa, and beekeeping on another note.
Absolutely wonderful character, person I've had the privilege to know now for the last 2 years. We have a very good relationship and connection. I think it was only a matter of time before he came onto the show and shared with us some of his awesome stories. And not only in my life has he been influential, but in so many other passages he has touched during his time flying. It is just a wonderful person and truly a privilege to have him on the show.
Yes, and just to pick his mind, to see what it was from day one to where he is currently, conscription in the Air Force in the South African Army back in the day. And yeah, everything that goes with the success and failures of indulging in becoming a pilot.
Without any further ado, our guest this week, Captain Ian Bruce. I am Brendan Llewellyn.
And I'm Llewellyn Fisher.
And you are listening to Finding Borders.
Roll intro. Season 2, Episode 8.
Good day, everyone. Welcome to Finding Borders. Captain Ian Bruce, would you please give a quick introduction?
Well, good morning, gents, ladies. Ian Bruce, living in Cape Town, South Africa, perhaps one of the most beautiful cities in the world. Airline captain now for the past 25 years, been flying for some 31 years. And I've been to a number of interesting places, including Antarctica. And I suppose Australia would have to be an interesting place, particularly if you go up to Darwin. And currently, a few more years to go in my flying career, and then it'll be time for retirement and sit back and watch sunsets.
So let's start with you as a pilot, Ian. Where does what motivates you to fly? What is the interest that you have for flying? Where did that come from?
I think most boys grow up, you either want to be a pilot, a policeman, or a fireman. And most parents hope you actually grow up, and if you don't, you become a pilot. Always enjoyed flying. The idea of flying, sitting up there and watching the world go by. And so it's been there from a youngish age. And I had to wait a while, and I started flying when I was 31, but we're there where we need to be.
Yeah, and when you said you had to wait until you're 31 then, so what sort of procedures would you have to go through to be declared competent to fly?
It's a long process. Obviously, you've got to start with a private pilot license, student license, then you get a private license. And then from that, you've got to build hours for commercial licenses. And currently, you need a minimum of 200 hours with certain other parameters thrown in. And then you need an instrument rating, which permits you to navigate through areas where you don't have any visual contact with the horizon. So we go through that, and then once you've got your commercial license, once again, you've got to build a relevant number of hours, and then you write another bunch of exams, and then you become, once doing testing, you get an airline transport pilot license, which is the top commercial license that you can get.
Okay, excellent. Now, obviously, one of your standout adventures has to be the journey to Antarctica. Could you walk us through that? Tell us a bit more. And because you have so many interesting tales, and specifically the Antarctica one, I think was something would be a point of interest.
Antarctica is a stunning place. Can be very dangerous. Obviously, as a number of people have found over the years. But from a flying side, it starts. We went down with the C-130 civilian version, based in my days anyway, in Christchurch, New Zealand. And the day typically would actually start, the planning would start the day before. Once we got hold of the weather, because weather being very, very crucial in Antarctica, it can actually change very quickly. And we'd get that window and we would start prepping and get the load ready. Any passengers that were going down, they'd all get together. And the next morning we would leave Christchurch around about 10 o'clock in the morning, as I recall, and then fly down over the Southern Ocean. Again, some treacherous environments, no navigation aid, so purely based on GPS navigation. Although there were some people that still felt the need for using a sextant to actually take position measurements from stars and the sun. However, GPS overrode all of that. And getting down to the continent itself, it's absolutely stunning. I mean, it's a little bit surreal the first few times you go down there to think that you're actually going down there and you're actually right there, you're flying over the Antarctic continent. And then the approach, the landing in that, we land on the sea, on sea ice to be more specific, approximately 2 meters of sea ice. And it's just an area that's just graded, so it's nice and flat and even. And then they grid it, they sort of scrape it, so there's a little bit of traction. Obviously, your biggest problem with ice is that it melts and then becomes very slippery. So they grid it, and it gives a bit of traction, which makes handling the aircraft on the ground a whole lot better and easier. So we used to go down to what was then Terra Nova Bay. It has now changed. I forget the name now. It's now named after one of the Italian directors of research, I think he was, back in some days gone by, and then when he passed away, they named the bay after him. And then, of course, we obviously flew down to McMurdo as well. Yeah, it's great. It's beautiful, and stunning scenery. Wildlife down there is also fairly different. None of the wildlife seems to care. The fact that you within a given distance of them, they've all got their comfort zones. Some of your skewers, just like a seagull, you can get well within a meter from them, and they'll just carry on washing and going about their daily dues. Your big seals, they might like 1.5 to 2 meters, and then they'll start moving away. Your penguins, beautiful emperor penguins, you can get into the meter, 2 meters from them as well, unless you go and sit on your haunches, and then they will come up to you very close to a meter. But yeah, beautiful flying, stunning scenery, treacherous conditions sometimes, but we flew on the good days, which is great.
What I'm curious about, Ian, on that note with your C-130 airplane, so it's not so much the distance between Christchurch and New Zealand to Antarctica, and it's not also, the top speed of these planes, which can be almost 600 kilometers an hour. It's the fact that you said you had to essentially land on, solid ice with one of these planes, and these planes weigh well over 34,000 kilograms, 34 tons. So what was it like exactly putting it down on such a rugged surface that could collapse from underneath you at any moment?
It's tested before we go there. They take a couple of drilling positions to test the thickness and the density of the ice. So it's I guess somebody went and landed there the first time, must have been a little bit nervous about it, but it's all been done before, and we're quite happy about that. But what did happen the one day is that I believe the situation was there was a bit of a freak swell that came in from the ocean. Now, Terra Nova Bay is exactly that. It's almost a little bit of a horseshoe bay. And the swell came in from the open ocean, and it just lifted the pack ice, and it broke the pack ice up. And then it bounced back off the cliff, and it took all the ice with it. We were due to go down that morning, and that was cancelled because we're not capable of landing on the water. And it left very little left of the runway, very, very little, and the rest was all washed out to sea. So that was the end of Terra Nova Bay for that season. So we operated to McMurdo.
I suppose a sea captain won't know how deep his submarine can go until he tries it out. So, yeah, like you said, it's been tested before.
And now also I want to ask, now obviously Antarctica is a very, very cold place, but like what did the temperatures drop to during your stay there?
Oh, we go down there in the summer when the weather's good. So your temperatures are really around about zero, maybe -1, -2. They're not very cold at all by comparison to their winter temperatures. So it's quite bearable. I mean, there were times we were walking around with short sleeve shirts on the base itself. But yeah, that's also, some of us are more cold resistant, I guess, than others.
And did you undergo any special training for that temperatures and climate and stuff like that? Can you walk us through that?
We do a very rudimentary course in Christchurch at the little Antarctic Centre they got there. And they just go about the survival, what to do in the case of, and the big thing is don't lose your gloves. You need your gloves, you need your warmth, you need protection. And pitching tents, we were lucky, we pitched tents in normal conditions, but down there, you could have 100, 200 kilometers an hour and you try to pitch a tent so that you can stay out of the elements. So it's difficult, and you just hope and pray that you never end up in a situation like that where you actually have to do it. But other survival training, not too much actually. We didn't.
I'm aware that you, according to Brendan, did cargo airdrops for the United Nations at one stage. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Well, it's airdrops. It's quite a common thing to do with C-130s. We used to take food into in various areas, particularly in Africa, and we'd have, depending on the distance to the drop zone, anything between about 14 and 18 tons of food on the aircraft. And that's done in two sticks. So we've got the left and the right hand stick in the back of the aircraft. So what you'd basically do is you'd fly down over the drop zone, you mark the zone, and then we'd come back and we'd configure the aircraft with flaps and get the ramp down once the speed's correct, fly over the zone, and you would release the load and it would go hurtling out the back of the aircraft. And with a little bit of practice, we got very, very accurate. We're going to try and get some video footage up for that a bit later, but you get very accurate. You hit that cross repetitively. So it's great. It's lots of fun. It's a little bit different flying.
And I don't know if this is the same story, but previous you had a story about the bullet holes in the aircraft afterwards you guys saw. Was this with the cargo drops?
No, we never had any of those, not in the Hercs anyway. And definitely not in my time at the company I was when we were operating them. That bullet hole was in the roof of an aircraft when we were going, ironically, in the roof of the aircraft going into Mogadishu, to an Airbus A320, and we found the bullet hole afterwards. Fortunately, it didn't pierce all the way through. There was just the outer skin that had the bullet hole, AK-47. So it was just a very, very lucky shot from the ground at some stage. We're just not too sure how it got through the roof, because we were never inverted at that stage.
And is there any other dangerous places you've flown before? Because obviously I knew you flew to Baghdad just before the Gulf War, if I'm correct, but obviously Mogadishu and stuff like that. Is there any others you can comment about?
Australia, because of the odds, they are very dangerous. No, we went to some how should I say, not so nice place, but dangerous places. Not really. No real war zones as such. Baghdad was absolutely stunning before the Americans went in there, and it was great. It was nice. It was peaceful. Everybody was friendly. Good food. Could even get a beer in Baghdad if you played your cards right and you knew which door to knock on. So everything was possible. But yeah, once the war started, obviously we were out. So we were aircraft I was flying at the time was one of the last aircraft to be out. And but yeah, no, the real danger zones. Africa's always a bit of a danger zone. When you get up into the equator, north of the equator, there's always some hotspots there, but we were never involved in any major issues. Sudan, tricky, but nothing really of any great concern. We did an evacuation the one day, town called Malakal, southern Sudan, where the rebels had given us literally 6 hours to get in and evacuate the population. And we went in with the Hercs and we just loaded people in the back of the Hercs and flew them out. But yeah, again, you're given a window, go in there, do it, everything's fine. Come in after the window and, things might not be so pretty in the background. So yeah, but otherwise, no real conflict environments.
Were you conscripted into the Air Force at all, Ian? Back in the day when conscription was still a thing in South Africa, you had, the infantry and the Air Force.
Yeah, I was in the Air Force for 4 years. I was an air traffic controller there, ironically. And then, so only for 4 years. I won't tell you exactly which years, but there were quite a few back. And after that, went into general business, the computers and plastics and marketing, sales marketing, photographic, until I got into the aviation.
And also, I wanted to ask, now obviously you're a commercial pilot and have flown for many, many years. Does that mean that you can fly all airplane models, or is there some that are restricted? Or
obviously, in military aircraft, it's out of the sort of equation generally for most people. But yeah, my license, the ATP license, not only my license, so the ATP license permits one to fly as a captain on an aircraft heavier than 700 kilograms. Less than that, you only need a commercial license. So yes, I'm allowed to, but I would have to do a type rating on each specific aircraft. It's not like a car where you get out of Volkswagen and you get into a Datsun and you're getting into your doesn't quite work, regardless of the size. So we need to do a type rating, which is usually a course, could be an online course, it could be a home study course, CBT, computer-based, or it could be lectures in a classroom, after which you'd write the required exams, which is purely the technical and which includes limitations. And then you go into the simulator and do the required number of sessions in the simulator.
I'd actually like to inquire more about the simulator, because I know you often go to the simulator. What does it look like? And does it look like flight simulator? What does it like have all the buttons and stuff? Like, explain us more, paint us a picture.
The simulator is identical to the flight deck of the aircraft type that you're flying. There are some generic simulators, but on the bigger aircraft, your new airliners, and that they are type specific. Airbus has got a little bit smarter, where they've got a couple of their general cockpit is the same, and they've got a couple of modules or that they can interchange. So it is slightly modular for some of their aircraft types, but otherwise every aircraft's the same. When you go in there and you practice the things that you can't do in the air with passengers. So and of course so it's a lot of handling, hand flying and that. So handling skills you do, and then you obviously practice emergencies. So that's what it's all about. So, and that usually is 2 sessions of 4 hours twice a year is what we do currently. And the one lot is just renewal of the license, and the other one, the second session would actually then be your just proficiency training.
And tell us now, in the event of an emergency, should it happen, what is exactly the role of a pilot handling the situation?
Get the aircraft on the ground safely. That's first priority, is the aviate, fly the airplane and get it, depending on the emergency as well. You know, some emergencies are just inconveniences and some are very, very real. And, you know, the very real ones we hear about all the time although they're becoming less and less frequent, thankfully. And the smaller emergencies, really, a lot of passengers don't even know about because it never gets to the media. It's never been an issue on the flight deck. So you might, for example, lose an electrical system, which could be quite critical. But passengers wouldn't even know that. You could lose hydraulics, pneumatic systems, even pressurization. You could lose one of those systems, and that wouldn't make a big difference in many instances to the passenger's comfort. We would know it up front, and we'd be dealing with that on a very sequential basis. We got checklists. We've got a QRH, which is a quick reference handbook, and that's got the procedures to follow for each, but not all of the emergencies. Some of the emergencies are out of the scope of the books, and that's when experience comes in, and you pull on that, and you're able to deal with the situation 99.9% of the time.
Well, on that note, Ian, and I forget where I read this, but I am aware that in some instances, the pilot and the co-pilot would each have separate meals in case one of them got food poisoning from the meal. Is that true or is that a myth? I'm quite curious.
It's very much the case. And we always had different meals allocated to us, but chicken or beef, an airline. If you're lucky, you get a bit of fish. But yeah, it was there. I don't know if it's still applied today. We carry our own catering, so it doesn't matter.
Was there ever like a major incident in your time of flying that, let's say, it falls without the 99.9% of incidences that no one would know about? Was there ever a moment where it was do or die and you had to put the plane down as safely as possible within a moment's notice?
Thankfully, not in my career thus far. No, the incidents, and there haven't been many, have all been very, very manageable, and well, I'm still here, and so are all the passengers. But no, never one of those sort of Sully type moments, never having to land in the Hudson or in False Bay, which would be even worse. So fortunately, and we talk about it, but I don't think there's that many of those particular situations that happen out there. Not anymore. Aircraft is far too reliable.
Talking about reliability, let's not talk about the technical, but let's talk, is there a physical person or crew member you ever had trouble with, or was there a difficult situation there, particularly with a passenger maybe?
Yeah, there's often passenger issues, at the back, but the policies, you leave the flight deck door closed. You don't deal with the passengers at all. You could manage without one cabin attendant, but without a pilot, it sort of does pose extra risk to everybody. So once the doors are on the ground, it's different, but in the air, we don't go and leave that flight deck at all for any disruption in the back of the aircraft.
And as I understand, in the US, they have flight marshals, and I do think that's not a thing in South Africa. So if a situation would arise, is that something the co-pilot would handle, or just another crew member?
Yeah, why the Yanks did, I don't know. They feel it's necessary. I think we've been fortunate here that it has something that we've needed to do, other than doing repatriation flights, of illegals, where then obviously you'd have some air marshals with. Is it required here? I think a situation would have to present itself before they thought along those lines, but obviously I can't speak from an authority or civil aviation authority point of view. But yeah, and who knows? There might very well be one on board that we don't know about.
And tell us, what does the 3 golden stripes mean on your pilot shirt?
It means you're the co-pilot.
Okay, can you describe us more? Is it then 4 for the main pilot?
Yeah, captain's got 4, senior co-pilot's got 3, a junior co-pilot's got 2 or 2.5, depending on their experience.
If we're going to take a split second away from aviation, then what is it exactly that you do nowadays when you're not flying or when you're not in your modules and simulations? Anything, pastimes and hobbies that you like to indulge in?
Brendan to work and fetching late at night, mostly. Hobbies at the moment, I'm getting into beekeeping, and that started a year ago, just over a year ago, actually months ago now. My son decided he stays down on the Breda River, which is a river in the Southern Cape here, and he thought it'd be nice to have a couple of beehives down there. So obviously, come to Dad to pay for them, and I thought, well, seeing I'm paying for them, might as well keep one. Kept one in the garden and arrived, and from that one initial spot, we built it up, and currently 6 hives, and then I'm managing another 5. And I'm about to go this morning and remove another 2 swarms of bees. So it's keeping me busy on the off days. And then, of course, you always got to look after the house.
So then, is there anything in particular that interested you in beekeeping? Or is it, like you said, just something that happened to come along and you were good at it?
But the interest actually grew. They're fascinating little creatures. And, we've got to remember that without bees, we'll all be dead in a matter of years.
Exactly.
They're pollinating in the region of 80% of our food crops at the moment. It's without them, we're gone. And that's without the medicinal properties in honey and in propolis, which are untapped at this stage. But and also in the bee venom, there's a lot of medicinal properties there that have not been tapped at all, or exploited. But I'm not saying exploiting the bees, but the breakdown of it could well lead to various other remedies for things. They say that beekeepers don't suffer from arthritis because they're getting stung on a regular basis. I don't know how many stings you need before you start getting immunity from arthritis, but things like that. So there's something in the venom that could be very, very useful, beneficial to us as mere humans. Of course, at the same time, enough of them and they'll kill you.
And I take it you consider yourself somewhat of an environmentalist, or you at least take the environment into consideration in your everyday life?
Well, of course, I love the outdoors. The environment's very, very important to all of us. It's just exploited by some people to a very detrimental level, but we won't get into that today. But yeah, no, the environment's, it's crucial, it's critical. Take it away, we're gone.
Now, I read somewhere that beekeeping goes way back. They say it's actually the second oldest profession after prostitution. And obviously, there's much more administration and things that go in it today. And I know you registered as a beekeeper. And I wanted to ask, do you have to register each hive every time you get a new one? Is there a limit? Can you talk us through that?
No, you register as a beekeeper, and that you've got to renew that every 2 years, as I recall at the moment. But yeah, on your registration, you advise them on how many hives you're doing and in what area. Is it, residential? Is it agriculture? Is it a hobby? Is it a business? But yeah, we a lot of guys are looking at bylaws at the how many hives you're allowed to keep in your backyard, and obviously it comes down to you don't want to aggravate the neighbors with your bees, but they'll be more than happy to take a jar of honey from you. So you got to keep a nice balance. Yeah, there's a lot of bylaws that have to be complied with or ignored.
Well, then, as a final question, then, Ian, if you were to say anything, any piece of advice to any new coming pilot who is in your position that you were all those years ago, what would you say to them that you wish you heard in your time when you started?
Become a fireman.
Become a firefighter.
Yeah. No, listen, go for it. If you've got the passion for it, go for it. It's a long, hard slug. Obviously, more and more expensive these days. It's great, and we just got to hope that we don't get this plane scenario too soon. Either going to scare passengers away, but scare a lot of people out of jobs.
Yeah.
Go, what can I say? It's great. It's the best office in the world. The ever-changing window. The picture's always different. Beautiful.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. It has been a privilege to talk to such a veteran pilot for so many years. And thank you. I think actually you have so many stories, we might do a sequel someday.
Good heavens, I'll have to do some flying so we can make some stories.
Yes, we look forward to it. No, thank you very much, Ian. You've been great. It's been a very educational experience, and just all the best going forward.
Thanks a lot, and nice to meet you, and all the best on your side.